lifting up Jesus, opening His Word from Australia, Denmark, Israel, Japan, New Zealand, Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, Singapore, South Africa, United Kingdom, Thailand, the Philippines, United States, and throughout the world. You're watching Moriel TV.
There are many examples of this, one of which is the one you cited. We deal with this on various teachings, including our teaching on Micah chapter 1 and the teaching on King Hezekiah. What happens when a revival comes, but it doesn't go far enough? People go so far, but not all the way. They leave the mechanisms in place for backsliding. Even though they brought the church out of rebellion, or they brought Israel out of rebellion back to God, they only restored what was in Scripture up to a certain point. Let's begin with the high places. There was one high place, as I've said many times, where God ordained to be worshipped. That was Mount Zion in Jerusalem. As we read in the Psalms, Gadol Adonai me'olal me'od be'ir Eloheinu har kodsho yepinov sosman kol haaretz har Tzion mi'erketei tzafon Kiryat Melech Rav. Great is the Lord, greatly to be praised, the city of our God, the mountain of His holiness. Beautiful for elevation, the high place. The joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion on the sides of the north, the city of the great King. What was happening is they were not worshiping other gods on those high places. They were worshiping Yahweh on those high places. We've warned many times, as I once heard a preacher from Northern Ireland say, there is no doxology without theology. The doctrine must be right for God to accept the worship. Jesus said the Father wants to be worshipped in spirit and in truth. If the doctrinal theology and the lyrics and so forth of what we do is not scriptural, God does not accept the validity of the worship. What these ancient Hebrew kings were allowing is the worship of the true God unscriptural way. Because they put an end to Baal worship or Molech worship, they thought that that was the revival, that they had restored something biblical. But they did not go all the way and tear down the high places. They allowed people to continue to worship on the high places, howbeit worship the true God. When you worship the true God in the wrong way, it will inevitably lead to worshiping other gods and idolatry at some point. It's interesting that the Hebrew term for idolatry is the same as the Hebrew term for alien worship. It's called avodah zerah. Avodah zerah means strange worship. Remember, the sons of Aaron burned strange fire. They didn't burn the strange fire to another god. They worshiped the true God in the wrong way. They burned it to Yahweh. It must be according to the dictates of Scripture. So much Christian worship today, things like Hillsong, is fundamentally unscriptural in what they're singing, not to mention what they're often doing. God does not accept that as valid worship. Now, when you worship the true God in the wrong way, eventually you're going to go into some kind of idolatry. I think of people who were saying charismatic Catholics are born again because they're praying in tongues. But what do you do when charismatic Catholics are praying in tongues to Mary? Witch doctors pray in tongues. It is God alone whom we worship. Mary is not the co-mediatrix or the co-redemptrix, as some Roman Catholics teach. She's certainly not the co-mediatrix. There is one mediator between God and man, Jesus the righteous. Yet the veneration of Mary, which Catholics call hyperdulia, by biblical definition, is worship. They bow down to images of her. What happened? They began worshiping the true God in the wrong way, and eventually they begin worshiping other deities. Of course, it isn't really Mary. It's simply a pseudo-Christianization of Diana of Ephesus and so forth, the pagan female cult deities from the ancient world, masquerading as Mary. It's all demonic. Worship must be scriptural. These kings who brought revival and did many good things went so far and no further. They didn't want to push it. They let the people continue to do certain things that were unscriptural as long as they were not overtly idolatrous. Within one generation, this meant the people would revert to their old idolatrous ways. You've got to tear down the high places. The quintessential example of this in the history of the church is the Reformation. They left in place Erastianism, the unscriptural marriage of church and state. They left in place patristic authority, getting doctrine from the church fathers, particularly Augustine. They left in place many unscriptural practices. Hence, Protestantism very quickly went off the rails, and in the modern era has become more morally and spiritually bankrupt than Roman Catholicism. At least officially, as we pointed out, the Roman Catholic Church would not have put a benediction on same-sex marriage or homosexual ordination, even though sexual perversion and homosexuality is widespread covertly throughout the Roman Catholic clergy. At least officially, they don't sanction it. But major Protestant denominations do. Protestantism has become worse than Catholicism, but its problem went back to its inception. It never went far enough. It is akin to what Jesus told the church in Sardis. I found your deeds incomplete. They brought some kind of a revival. The reformers went back to sola gratia, sola fide, only by faith, sola fide, only by grace, sola gratia, only scripture, sola scriptura, they said. But in practice, they went back to patristic authority, the church fathers. It was not sola scriptura. They left unbiblical institutions and practices in place. Hence, it went off the rails very, very quickly. Good leaders who did good things initially, but did not go far enough. In the church age, the equivalent of those kings of Israel who did that, who did not tear down the high places, are the Protestant reformers. They're the equivalent. What they did was right. What they failed to do was wrong and set the stage for another avalanche of backsliding. I hope this clarifies matters. When a revival comes, we go back to Scripture radically. My name is Jacob Prasch. Thank you for listening. God bless.